Let's get into it. What you about to hear is too permanent for comfort. Number 10. Close your eyes for a second and imagine the ocean. Not the ocean you know, with dolphins, sharks, coral reefs, all of that. 444 million years ago, the ocean was something else entirely. Warm, dense, teeming. Creatures that looked like they were designed by someone who had never seen an animal before. Armored, tentacled, spiky, slow, and absolutely everywhere. Trilobites crawling across the seafloor, nautiloids drifting through warm currents, filter feeders the size of dinner tables. There was no land life, no trees, no sound above the waves. The entire living world existed beneath the surface of the sea, and for hundreds of millions of years, it was doing just fine. Number 9. There was land, of course. Bare rock, silent coastlines, not a single living thing above the waterline. And when that landmass, Gondwana, drifted slowly over the South Pole, snow began to fall on it. And this time, it didn't melt. Year after year, it compressed. Glaciers formed. Sea levels dropped. The shallow coastal waters, the warm, busy neighborhoods where virtually all life had settled, simply vanished. For up to 400,000 years, the ice held. Then, volcanic activity began pumping CO2 into the atmosphere, and the planet slowly warmed again. The ice melted. Sea levels rose. For a brief moment, it must have looked like a recovery, but the ocean water, which had previously been glacially cold and rich in oxygen, warmed up and consequently lost a large portion of its oxygen. The organisms that had survived the cold were now doomed to suffocate. 85% of all marine species on Earth gone, caused by a continent, moving at the speed of a fingernail growing. Number 8. By the time of the late Devonian, something new appeared on land. Trees, real trees, towering, spreading across the land for the very first time in history. Beneath them, the land was just beginning to stir. If you had knelt down and looked closely, you would have seen movement. Millipedes the length of your arm curling through the leaf litter. Primitive spiders picking their way across damp soil. The first wingless insects, blind and slow, feeling their way through a world that had never had anything walking through it before. Nature's first rough attempt at land life, still figuring out the rules. And the oceans had transformed too. Imagine a sea where the Dunkleosteus, an armored fish the size of a bus, patrolled the depths, with jaws that could snap a car in half. The first true sharks were circling. Sea scorpions the size of a grown man were hunting along the sea floor. On the muddy shores, fish were experimenting with legs. Awkward, slow, flopping forward. Generation by generation, they grew more confident, until the first true amphibians were picking their way across the riverbanks, and from them, the first reptiles. Creatures free to move wherever the land would take them. Number 7. The trees, it turns out, were catastrophically good at their job. Their deep root systems broke apart rock and released far more nutrients than the trees themselves could ever absorb. The trees set the table, but the rain served the meal to the sea. Rivers carried the overflow into the ocean, triggering a massive algae bloom. Algae exploded across the surface, and when they died, they sank to the ocean floor in enormous quantities. Bacteria breaking down the dead matter consumed the oxygen in the water faster than anything could replace it. Dead zones spread through the seas like a slow suffocation. The Dunkleosteus, the early sharks, the strange flopping creatures on the shore, all of them ran out of oxygen to breathe. Not killed by a predator, not hit by an asteroid, suffocated by plants doing exactly what plants are supposed to do. 75% of all species erased. But life, as it always does, found a way back. The Carboniferous period that followed was unlike anything before it. Vast forests of tree ferns and giant horsetails covered the land, pumping oxygen into the atmosphere in quantities the world had never seen. So much oxygen, in fact, that insects grew to sizes that would be impossible today. Dragonflies with wingspans wider than your hand. Millipedes the length of your leg patrolling the forest floor. The first winged insects took to the air. The first true reptiles appeared, no longer tied to the water. For 60 million years, life didn't just recover. It thrived, diversified, and pushed into every corner of the planet. And then, Siberia cracked open. Number 6. This is the one scientists call the Great Dying, and it earned that name. Before it hit, Earth was magnificent. After hundreds of millions of years of drifting, all the continents had finally collided into one, Pangaea, a single vast landmass surrounded by a global ocean so immense it had no name large enough to contain it. On land, gorgonopsids, apex predators with saber-like fangs as long as your forearm. Dicynodonts, wide-bodied herbivores with tusks and a beak, built like something that was assembled incorrectly and somehow still worked. And Dimetrodon, that strange reptile with a massive sail on its back, warming itself in the sun like it had all the time in the world. Hiding beneath all of them, the very first mammals, tiny and terrified, hoping not to be noticed. In the ocean, reefs stretching for hundreds of kilometers, crinoids swaying like underwater forests, ammonites spiraling through the current. Life had never been more diverse, never more confident. Number 5. Then Siberia cracked open. Volcanoes, not one, not 10, but a field of eruptions covering an area the size of Western Europe, began to pour CO2, methane, and toxic gas into the atmosphere. They didn't stop for hundreds of thousands of years. Global temperatures climbed 10 degrees. The oceans acidified. Oxygen in the water dropped to levels nothing could survive. On land, the soil dried out and cracked. Forests collapsed. The food chains that had supported everything just stopped. 96% of all marine species gone. 70% of all land vertebrates gone. If you had stood on Earth in the years after the Great Dying, you would not have heard a growl, a splash, a single rustling in the undergrowth. No footsteps, no movement, just wind and the smell of sulfur. 5 extinctions down, 2 more to go. And what you've just heard? That was the Earth destroying itself from the inside. What comes next is different. What comes next came from outside. Number 4. 50 million years after the Great Dying, roughly the same amount of time that separates us from the last dinosaurs, life had clawed its way back. The single continent was still intact, hot and largely desert, but near the rivers and coasts, forests had returned. New predators had emerged. Among them, Postosuchus, a crocodile-shaped hunter with enormous jaws that ruled the land long before the dinosaurs thought they had a chance. Early mammals, no bigger than a rat, scurried through the undergrowth at night. And everywhere, in the margins, a group of small, fast, upright creatures that nobody was paying much attention to yet, the dinosaurs. At this point, they were minor characters, bit players, living in the shadows of larger, stronger animals. Nobody would have bet on them. Number 3. Then Pangaea began to tear itself apart. As the supercontinent split, the rifting triggered eruptions that lasted 1 million years. The same pattern as before. CO2, heat, ocean collapse, ecosystem failure. 75% of all species gone. Postosuchus and the great crocodilians that had ruled the land gone. And in the silence left behind, those small, upright creatures stepped out of the shadows. They hadn't won anything. Everyone else had simply died. And because they would eat almost anything, insects, carrion, whatever scraps a dying world still had to offer, they survived. And the next 135 million years belonged to them. 4 extinctions. 4 times the planet nearly ran out of life. Each one felt like the end. None of them were, until the last one tried something new. Number 2. The dinosaurs had been here for 164 million years. Let that settle for a moment. Humans have existed for roughly 300,000 years, and we've already reshaped the planet beyond recognition. The dinosaurs had 500 times that, and they used every second of it. In the Jurassic, they reached their most spectacular. Brachiosaurus and Diplodocus, herbivores so vast they made the treetops look like a salad bar. Allosaurus, hunting in packs, bringing down prey 10 times its size. Going into the Cretaceous, they diversified even further. Tyrannosaurus rex, not the lumbering giant of old movies, but an animal with a sense of smell sharper than a modern bear and eyesight that could track movement from 3 kilometers away. Velociraptor, hunting in coordinated groups, outthinking prey that never saw it coming. The skies were ruled by pterosaurs, with wingspans wider than a small aircraft. The oceans patrolled by mosasaurs, so large they make great white sharks look like bait fish. This was a world at its most extravagant, its most alive. Number 1. On an ordinary morning, just like the 60 billion mornings before it, something entered Earth's atmosphere above what is now the Gulf of Mexico. A rock, 12 kilometers wide, traveling at 70,000 kilometers per hour. No creature on Earth knew it was coming. No creature on Earth could have done anything about it. The impact released more energy than all the nuclear weapons ever built, detonated simultaneously, multiplied by 1,000,000. The rock didn't just hit the ground, it vaporized it. Rock became gas, the ocean became steam. Everything within 1,000 kilometers ceased to exist within seconds. Within hours, superheated debris rained back down across the entire planet, incinerating everything it touched. Within days, a shroud of dust and ash had wrapped itself around the Earth. The sun disappeared, temperatures plummeted, plants stopped growing. Herbivores starved, carnivores starved after them. In the oceans, the food chain collapsed from the bottom up. The microscopic plankton that fed everything else died first, and the rest followed. 75% of all life on Earth gone, including every single non-avian dinosaur that had walked, swum, or flown across this planet for 164 million years. What survived was small, hidden, adaptable, warm-blooded. What survived was us, or rather, what would one day become us. 5 extinctions, 5 near-total resets, and every single time something held on, something small, something overlooked, something that had no idea it was about to inherit the world. Think about that the next time someone tells you we're not going to make it.